Okay, we should be going live. Give me just a moment to share with our groups. This will take just a moment. There we go. I see myself. Boom, 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 boom. All right, all shared. That's good. Let me share it with my timeline too. All right. Well, I see Shauna's watching. Hello, darling. So this is the bachelor edition of KetoMojoGogo this week. As you can see, Shauna's not here. She is out of town visiting the grandkids up in the state of Washington and having a good time. We were going to do this together, but her internet there is not sustainable for what we're wanting to do. So I decided to go ahead and go it alone this week. But we're going to talk about a few things. One thing is, hey, it's spring, right? Spring is here. That means it's a time for new beginnings, right? So we are, we've been through these struggles. We've been through the holidays. We've been through the new year. Now it's time to maybe just buckle down and you're doing your spring cleaning. Yep, Shauna says she's on the road right now. She's on the way up to some parks and having a good time. But it's time for spring cleaning. It's time to reassess where we are and maybe get serious about getting healthy, right? And notice I didn't say serious about losing weight. Losing weight is true. We want to do that too, but the first priority is to lose weight, right? That's where we want to get started, and that's how we want to get going with this. So one of the things I want to talk about was where we stand in our population, right? So you may not have noticed, but if you look around, you notice people around you, there are a lot of people that are overweight, right? And that is, nobody can deny that, right? And it's been a growing trend. I mean, this isn't just all of a sudden. This has been over the last 30 years. The percentage of people that are overweight and are obese has grown dramatically, right? And a study done in 2011, so this is 8 years ago now, was showing that at that time 2/3 of the people were measured to be metabolically unhealthy, right? They have metabolic syndrome, and that's a lot of people. If you go back 50 years ago, if you looked at pictures of people, most people were slim and healthy, but that is not the case anymore. So that part back in 2011, which said at that point 2/3 of people were metabolically unhealthy. We've been told all this time that we need to be low fat, on a low fat diet, and exercise more and eat less, and it's going to fix everything. Hello, Teresa. But the problem is that over time, this problem has just gotten worse. And so metabolic syndrome is defined as, you have a waist circumference to height ratio that's not 2 to 1, right? So if you're 72 inches tall, your waist circumference should be half of that, right? So basically, if you're 70 inches tall, your waist should be 35 or less. That would be normal, or not in a bad ratio. If you have high fasting blood glucose, so if you're above 100 when you're fasting on your blood glucose, and those are American units, you are considered to have high blood glucose. If you have high blood pressure, that's another one. If you have high triglycerides, and also if you have poor HDL to triglyceride ratio, if that ratio is not right. So if you have too many triglycerides and not enough HDL, that's a bad factor, right? So if you have 3 out of 5 of those, you are considered to be an metabolic syndrome. And also, by the way, cardiovascular risk, right? They're the same thing, right? So that's what we're looking to attack. and we want to go after this. And this is just, very basic. But what about, as humans, as Americans, especially, who most of my crowd is, but if you're around the world, the same thing. We have been told to eat a low-fat diet and to exercise more and eat less. Well, let's think about what have we done, right? So let's look at this chart here from these statistics from U.S. Fitness Center. Since 2000, the amount of money spent in the health industry has been steadily increasing, but yet the obesity rate has also been steadily increasing. So the word is you just can't outrun a bad diet, right? I mean, the whole purpose is, well, I can eat, as long as I go out and work out every day this week, I can eat those donuts. But that doesn't seem to work that way, right? It doesn't seem to work that way at all. So we've been listening to what the dietary guidelines are. And this is not, stuff that I've made up or pulled from like healthy organizations or saying don't eat grains. This is from the Whole Grains Council is telling us that we are doing exactly what they've instructed us to do, right? We're eating more whole grains. We are increasing the amount of grains that we eat and how much are grown, but yet the same problem is still happening, right? We're still getting more obese. We're actually eating less beef than we used to, but yet the same problem is still happening. We are still getting fatter. So it's not that we're not listening to what the nutritional guidelines are telling us. As a population, we've been doing exactly that, but the results have been not what we would expect, not what we would hope, right? And it starts off with, what are we eating for breakfast, right? So if we look at this here as what would be considered a complete balanced breakfast, right? And that's one thing I did this morning. I just went through and looked at, what is considered a balanced breakfast, right? And you look at all these fruits and grains and breads and orange juice. The direction that we're going is not great, but if we look right in the middle there, what we see an egg. Well, eggs must be the problem, right? If we're eating eggs, that's what's causing us to be unhealthy. But for the most part, people are really trying to follow those nutritional guidelines and get better. So that's kind of where I'm coming from, and what is I think we can start looking at root causes for why we are getting more obese and why we are not as healthy as we should be. All right. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about what exactly I believe and what the research is beginning to show makes up a balanced meal, a balanced diet. And for most simplicity, I would say that it is this, that we need to stop eating processed foods, right? If your food comes in a box, comes in a bag, it comes, got a label on it, these type of things, then you're probably not wanting to eat that, right? That is not something that is the proper human diet. Also, the amount of sugar that's in juices and sodas and things like that, do you really think that it makes sense to be bombarding your body with that much sugar? And the same thing goes for fruit, right? Fruit is really just nothing but a big sugar bomb, right? I'm not saying you can't have a little here and there, but the problem is that fruit has been pushed on us quite a bit over the years. And the thing is, you really just don't need to be eating that much fruit. Fruit is pretty much nature's candy, right? It's a device to attract animals to come eat the fruit, to spread the seeds of a plant. The plant does not really care about the health of the animal. It has a design where it just wants you to come get the seeds and then move them along. And the animal, being us a human as well, we're looking for instant gratification, and that fruit can be that instant gratification that could be causing issues. So if sugar is something that should probably be avoiding, we should also know what all the types of sugar that are out there that you might eat that you should be aware of, right? So here's kind of a graphic telling you an idea of, if you're looking at the ingredients of the food you're eating, again, those processed foods, right? Food that comes in a box. These are things that are really another name for sugar, whether, sucrose, high fructose corn syrup, agave nectar, honey, all of these different syrups and corn sweeteners, dextrin. I mean, there's a million words for sugar. And so these are the things that we should probably be avoiding if we want to be peak health, right? So these are just kind of things of awareness we can tell you and give you those ideas. So I'm not sure if you're aware of this or not, but at any given point, if you don't consume sugar, you're still going to have 1 teaspoon of sugar floating around your bloodstream, right? And that 1 teaspoon of sugar has no problem being used by your body. As a matter of fact, your brain needs it, right? Your brain needs just a little bit of glucose to keep it going. But what happens if you don't eat any sugar? Are you going to not have any sugar in any of this in your body? Well, absolutely, that's not the case, because your body has the ability to convert protein and fat into glucose, right? So it can do that just fine. And that's actually is something that it does on demand. So you don't necessarily need to be adding a bunch more sugar to your body, because what that will do is it has to then raise your insulin level, because it's got too much sugar, and it has to start putting it in places that storing it for later, right? So it basically stores it as fat. It stores it in your liver, which eventually leads to fatty liver disease. So the idea is you don't want to be eating too much of the sugar. And by the way, fructose, which is the sugar that is mostly found in fruit, is the worst about that. It is what goes to your liver first. So just think about that. If you're, when you're thinking that a banana is a great choice for a snack during the day, bananas are loaded in sugar. There are other things that are loaded in sugar that, if you compare them to a teaspoon of sugar, we can take a look at that here and see from our diet things that we have been eating on a regular basis that we think were healthy are not. So if you look at, for example, start with this basmati rice. Basmati rice is the equivalent of 10.1 teaspoons of sugar for a regular serving size. I love rice, man. Rice was one of my go-tos when I was a vegetarian. I would eat rice and lentils and chickpeas, not realizing how much I was bombarding my body with sugar. Also, potatoes. Potatoes are something else that both Shauna and I have been a lover of for a long time, and those are super addictive, right? You eat one potato and you want more, and the same thing with French fries, spaghetti, corn, all of these things. And you look at a banana; it's one banana is almost 6 teaspoons of sugar all by itself. And if you look at on the lower scale, you see broccoli and eggs are really low or almost no sugar. So those are the things that you want to kind of keep an eye on, that you want to be able to eat on and fuel your body, because what happens when you remove the sugars from your body adjusts, and you are a very adaptable being, right? You can use fat as a fuel. And by the way, the fat burns a lot longer than sugar. I've heard the analogy saying that for sugar is like throwing leaves on a fire, whereas fat is throwing a big log on the fire, right? The log will burn all day, where the leaves will burn up instantaneously, and now you are needing more fuel. So you just have to keep getting more of those leaves or that sugar to keep burning. Let's talk about some of the other things. We talked about, these are common items. Let's talk about fruits. So we talked about bananas are almost 6 teaspoons of sugar, like one banana, right? Grapes are very high, apples, especially the Golden Delicious. Remember that the fruits that we eat today are very engineered to be extremely sweet. So as a species, when we were hunter-gatherers, we would eat probably some fruits in season, right? And the growing season for fruits is very short. It's the summertime. So just keep that in mind. The fruits we have now are engineered to be really sweet, and so we eat a lot of those fruits. We tend to be overindulging on sugars, and we have an epidemic, right? We have an epidemic of obesity. So my challenge to you would be to find different foods to enjoy rather than fruits and sugars and Pop-Tarts and the like, because those are not really what's going to be helpful to you, right? So what are we suggesting to eat instead of these high sugar foods? Well, I've got a food list here that we just kind of recommend. I mean, this is something that Dr. Westman has been promoting, and he's been in this business for a very long time. I say business, he's been in the business of helping people, right? He has probably one of the largest obesity clinics in the United States, and this is the methodology that he uses. Now, let's talk about keto for a minute, because I want to make sure that you understand that there are different reasons to do keto. Some people do keto for the reasons of therapeutic. So there are a lot of people that may have a traumatic brain injury, or they may have autism or have seizures. And for those people, they execute a ketogenic diet differently than I'm suggesting that we do here. They are very concerned about the amount of fat that they eat, because the amount of fat that they eat will help them in some of their symptoms. But for a nutritional ketosis diet or ketogenic diet, you're not so concerned about the amount of fat that you eat. Your real concern is the amount of carbohydrates or sugars that you are not consuming, right? So looking at the protocol that we're recommending here, and that protocol is that you would eat 20 grams of carbohydrates a day, and that's total, and that's not net, because I know you hear a lot of people that say, well, I'm eating net carbs. That gets confusing, because sometimes labels are misleading on what they are subtracting as far as net carbs. So the idea is just to keep it simple, 20 grams of carbs per day. And the way you achieve that is not by just only avoiding these foods, but by prioritizing the proteins, right? So if you're prioritizing eating fatty meats and non-starchy vegetables, and you eat those until you're full, then you don't have room to eat the less healthy foods, right? The foods that are going to be doing you damage. So if you eat those until you're full, and then you just don't eat again until you're hungry, right? Just try not to snack. I would probably prefer you would overeat calories on your meals, and then go longer between meals. And that's really all seriously about keeping your insulin and blood glucose in check, right? We'll talk a little bit more about that in the future. So let's talk about the things that we are recommending that you do eat. Remember, the idea is to prioritize things that you do eat, which then leaves less room for the foods that you shouldn't be eating, right? So what's the priority? Well, meat. And not just meat, but fatty meats, right? And what I typically will focus on is red meat, whether it be ground beef, ground lamb, and I get the fattier stuff. So if I'm eating ground beef, I'm eating either the 75-25 or the 80-20 ground beef. And I'm trying to keep as much of that fat in as I can, because it's the protein and the fat that are going to cause satiation, right? They're going to make it so you are not hungry for longer. Right. So that's what you want to focus on. And then the next thing would be, your vegetables, and those vegetables would be, broccoli, cauliflower, asparagus, celery, eggplant, these things. And even within that, that's 1 cup a day, and that's not 1 cup each, that's 1 cup total. So because their vegetables typically do have some carbohydrates in them, right? So you just want to kind of focus on the vegetables that are lower in carb, the non-starchy vegetables, and then you can, if you like, you can also have 2 cups of salad greens a day. Neither of these are mandatory, by the way. These are, options, right? These are what help maybe provide some diversity to your diet, so that you're not feeling that you need to only eat, ribeyes every day. Some people just can't do that, so they need a little bit of diversity. So that's where the non-starchy vegetables and salad greens come in. What about fats? Now, I did mention that for a therapeutic diet, you want to focus on eating more fat, but for a nutritional ketogenic diet, you don't want to overconsume fat, right? The theory being that you want to burn your own body fat first, right? So talk a little bit more about that theory. So Dr. Westman, again, I'm a big fan. The guy has just really turned my life around and how he conducts this. But so he's done the clinical trials, right? In the clinical trials, he found that if you say eat 50 grams of carbs per day, of the population that did that, 1/2 or 50% of the people were able to get into ketosis. So that's great. There are a lot of people that are able to do it because they are more metabolically healthy. For some people that ate 30% of grams of carbs per day, 75% of them were able to get into ketosis. So again, they were more, there's a little bit narrower range, but you can do it. But what he did find was that 100% of the people that ate 20 grams of carbs per day or less, 100% were able to get into ketosis. So this is the way that works for everybody. So maybe you're more you are healthier and you're able to eat more, and that's fine. But this is the recommendation, the one that works for everyone. So that's the thing. So again, we're talking about nutritional ketosis. So step one on that is to eat 20 grams of carbs or less per day. And there's only 3 macronutrients, right? You've got carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. So if you're eating very little, say less than 5% of your calorie intake is from carbohydrates, the other 95% has to come from somewhere else, right? It turns out you can only eat so much protein. I mean, I really challenge you to try to eat more than a pound or a pound and a half of protein per day from animal sources. It's very difficult. And if you're eating fattier versions of these proteins, you're already getting a higher percent of fat than most people would get. So we're not telling you to be afraid of the fat, but what we don't really want you to do is over concentrate on these fats, not on dietary fats. So within this protocol, it does limit the amount of fat you should eat, right? It's not a low-fat diet by any stretch, but I'm going to call it maybe a moderate, healthy fat diet, right? So the limitation would be, cheese. We would see, actually, some people want to see more of me. That's fine. So we want to see cheeses, very limited fashion, amounts of cheeses, maybe some mayonnaise, a little bit limited on that as well. Olives are good, but again, limited. And olives are fruit, by the way. Maybe you might even have a little bit limited amount of blueberries or strawberries, but these are things that are very low in sugar. And if you look at the food list, as we were shown earlier, this is what we're really focusing on here, right? So limited fats, maybe you can eat some butter, coconut oil, avocado oil, etc., but those are great. But we really don't want to over focus on eating too many fats, right? And the most important thing is, so since we are prioritizing these proteins and moderating the fats, the big thing is now that will prevent you from eating the things that we don't want you to eat, and those would be sugars, right? So we're excluding all sugars: honey, agave, brown sugar. We want to, be careful of the sweet potatoes and potatoes, etc. Beans and legumes are typically very high in carbohydrates, and for me, they're also very inflammatory. Grains, as we showed earlier, rice, wheat, corn, in any form, especially if you process it right, will cause. Well, it's a lot of carbohydrates, and your body will not react well. And finally, fruits and fruit juices are a big deal as far as the amount of sugars you get. Because if you think about orange juice for a minute, orange juice, they strip all the fiber out of it, which might be helpful, and then you just are left with a lot of fructose. So keep that in mind. So the idea would be, and if you need a copy of this list, feel free to ping me. I'll be glad to send it. It's on all of our sites. It's on all of our groups. So again, the protocol that we follow and that we recommend would be to eat 20 grams of carbs a day or less. Eat fatty cuts of meat and non-starchy vegetables until you're full, and just don't eat when you're not hungry. I mean, it's hard to get any simpler than that. So what is the benefit of doing that precisely? What do we get out of eating in this way? And this is where Dr. Westman has broke out in his clinical trials. If you compare a low-carb, high-fat diet, which is what a ketogenic diet is, by the way, to a high-carb diet, you can see that on the bottom there is that your insulin level stays stable on a high carbohydrate meal or breakfast, which might look something like this, is going to do nothing but spike your blood sugar, and then as a result, your insulin level is going to spike as well, which insulin, a big thing that it does is it will, it's a fat building hormone, right? It's going to store that glucose into your liver and into your muscles and into your body as fat. And that's really not what we're looking to do, right? That's the antithesis of what we're trying to accomplish here, right? So those are the big things that I can think of as far as, here's new spring. Here we are trying to get going. We are wanting to be successful in all of this, right? So very basic stuff. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions. We welcome your questions and everything else. So it's a beautiful day here in Florida. I'm having a great time, but missing my wife. She's away from me. So this is just an opportunity to do a kind of a basics video, a get started video for you folks. If anybody has any questions, I'm more than ready to jump in and provide the information that we can. But we just want to encourage you guys. That's why we do this video, is so that you guys will be encouraged to do what we're doing. And what we're doing is, okay, in my case, 78 pounds as of this morning, down since August of 2018. I have put my type 2 diabetes into remission. I have normalized my blood pressure. My blood markers are normal for my cholesterol. My markers for CRP, my C-reactive protein, my inflammation markers have normalized. And that's what we are hoping for you, right? We are just wanting to be able to spread this message and find ways that we can help you get there. And that's the reason we have created our Facebook groups, our KetoMojoGogo Facebook group. We have created a Keto for Autoimmune Diseases Facebook group, and we've added the Keto for Autism because we just want to be able for people to help each other and be able to provide information and as many scientific studies as I can find, and videos of other people that are experts in the field, so that you guys can get this information. 78 pounds is great. And Shauna says she loves our keto family. And really, that's really what this is all about, guys. You guys are our keto family, and we want to see you guys be successful and do well. All right, so I'm a little over 30 minutes into this, but I've covered the materials I want to cover today. If you guys have any questions, be sure to check out our YouTube channel. We have a KetoMojoGogo YouTube where this will be rebroadcast there as well once I download it and load it up. We try to store everything there. If you have certain questions or topics that you would like for me or Shauna to cover. Oh, Shauna says she is down 55 pounds, right? So, and she's got challenges. Believe me, she's got hypothyroidism. She's got Hashimoto. She has lupus. She had to get her thyroid under control for her weight loss to start happening again. So this is not not everybody responds exactly the same. But what I will say is that everybody's blood glucose gets under control. Everybody's blood markers start getting under control. And once you get the ball rolling, then the weight starts coming as well. I'm a guy, I'm lucky in that respect. Guys tend to lose weight easier than women, especially postmenopausal women. So do keep that in mind. The idea is to get healthy first. And that's one thing I started with, right? We were talking about it's springtime and it's time to focus on your health. It's that spring cleaning time. Let's do it. All right, let's do it together. So guys, thank you for giving me part of your Sunday. I really appreciate it. I'm hoping this stuff is helpful for you. If it is, let me know. So we've got motivation to keep doing this, because guess who needs motivation? Shauna and I do, right? We need motivation as much as you guys do. We need encouragement. I mean, it's not just scale victories that help us get along. I know in our case, it is challenging to get in front of a camera and talk to people, especially early when we were still quite obese. And it's very hard to get up there, because the risk of failure is very high when you are just starting something new. So now I'm 7-8 months into it, and things are going well, but we've needed your encouragement, and we will continue to need your encouragement to move forward for ourselves, because as you encourage us, that gives us the strength to keep encouraging you, right? So Shauna says, I look hot. Thank you, honey. Your pictures there in Washington are just gorgeous. I miss you very much. So guys, I think I'm going to wrap it up. I, again, appreciate your time. So as we like to say here, Keto Mojo Go Go out.